pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. Hope you had a great day. We have our agenda tonight has to do with budget transfers, so I will ask the superintendent to discuss that, and then we will head into our budget workshop. Thank you all for coming this evening. So the budget transfer request tonight is to proceed with the well compliance. It came in, the state informed us that the amount was more than anticipated, and in order to ensure that we have the wells cleaned prior to, for the students, obviously we need to be able to run the water, and to have this done during February vacation, we needed to put it in front of you tonight. So I ask approval for the well cleanings to be able to move the transfer so we have the appropriate funding.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Pat?
What does that entail?
So both the high school and middle school have 2,000-gallon tanks that the wells pump into. The tanks are required to be cleaned, and the state gave us a mandate to clean them, and they want it done as soon as possible.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so item 3 on our agenda is the budget workshop, and before we talk about the budget, I just had a few quick comments as we head into this process. So if you would indulge me for just a few minutes. Good evening, school committee members, members of the administration, and the general public. Tonight is our budget workshop discussion, and I'm looking forward to a productive and respectful exchange. Last Friday, I had the opportunity to meet with Superintendent Picard, Assistant Superintendent Camella, Mr. Zenyan, the Director of Finance and Administration, Lynn Guvin from the Finance Office, and Jerry Auth, the Director of Charahoe Tech. The purpose of the meeting was to learn more about the realities of the fiscal year 26 budget and to put myself in a better position to be able to weigh in on our discussion tonight and to be a thoughtful partner in future budget conversations. I want to thank the superintendent and her team for putting together this budget and for presenting it to our committee and to the community last week. I realize this process takes an inordinate amount of time, and we all deeply appreciate your efforts, so thank you. In the past, I've paid a lot of attention to this process, trying to digest and absorb the varying moving parts of the budget. A budget today that represents about a $70 million price. As school committee members, we have an awesome responsibility to be the stewards of the taxpayers' investment and stewards of other state and federal resources. When a budget is put together, we have to be mindful that this process is not just numbers on paper. A budget reflects our strategic priorities, our commitment to programs, our commitment to educators, our commitment to staff, our commitment to the district's students and parents. A budget should also drive our investment into academic excellence. With that being said, when I met with the superintendent and her team last week, I emphasized my position that this budget should reflect our collective commitment to academic excellence. During the campaign, there was a question posed to me during a forum relative to budget cuts, to which I replied that we have to be mindful of what our local taxpayers could bear. But I also went on to say that in the future, when we're evaluating budgets, we also needed a mindset shift. We've been hyper-focused on cuts, but we also need to shift and be mindful of investing in academic excellence to be the best, and investing in programs that also support revenue generation. I asked the superintendent and her team, are you empowered to think outside the box? Has the school committee empowered you to think about the big picture and high-level outcomes? Do your budgets reflect those values? We are so focused on cuts, and yes, while I believe there are some room for adjustments or perhaps redirection of resources in the fiscal year 26 budget, there must also be room for us as a committee to have high-level conversations to ensure that our school district is the best. During our meeting, I asked Mr. Auth, the director of Charahoe Tech, questions about his program and how we could potentially support an expansion of Charahoe Tech. As you see in our budget materials, Charahoe Tech brings in over $3 million of revenue driven by out-of-district students. We should challenge ourselves to find a creative and thoughtful way to expand our out-of-district enrollment to drive additional revenue for Charahoe Tech, while obviously prioritizing our in-district students. In addition, I asked the administration about the possibility of keeping fifth graders in the elementary schools as a way to drive academic excellence and drive better outcomes in math and reading. When you look at our test scores from 4th to 5th grade, there is a significant drop in math and reading. As a school committee, we should be asking ourselves, what can and should we be doing differently, perhaps, to support better outcomes? 5th grade is the pipeline to middle school life, a time that can be challenging for students, both academically and developmentally. In my opinion, we as a committee should be working collaboratively with the administration to think outside the box to affect better outcomes for our middle school years, our middle school students. Our elementary schools are among the best in Rhode Island, and we should celebrate that. Why not support 5th graders by retaining them in an elementary setting, helping them to better bridge toward a future in the middle school? Keeping 5th graders in an elementary school setting would be a significant change. But sometimes change is good. Sometimes change is even great. I realize this potential change would impact our capital improvement planning, but if we are truly committed to academic excellence, isn't this perhaps a change worthy of our consideration? And with that, I look forward to a productive discussion this evening. Thank you for listening. So we have the fiscal year 26 budget in front of us. We had some recommendations last week from our omnibus meeting, and thank you to the elected officials and those who participated in last week's budget omnibus workshop, if you will. And tonight is our opportunity to talk as a committee about the fiscal year 26 budget. So I will open it up at this point. Jess.
I'm just curious, because you're speaking of the meeting that you had with this team, does Gina have any response that you'd like to share? I know the 5th grade idea has been floated for a long time. It was something that I brought up during the capital improvement plan about the new schools. I was told that if you move the children back to 5th grade to the elementary schools, then you have a vacant space at the middle school. So I just want to make sure that some of the things you said, Gina could have a chance to respond if she thought that was appropriate.
Absolutely.
Or she thought that it was pertinent to our conversation tonight.
Absolutely.
Saying that.
Yes, of course.
So, yes, Jess Purcell was definitely, even as a parent, had talked to, and many parents have brought it up, about the 5th grade. The School Building Authority and the laws in Rhode Island had changed in 2019. So there are different requirements when you're handling facilities. The school committee no longer can just say, I want to move this grade here and move that grade there. There has to be a stage 2 application and a stage 1 application that shows how you're going to then utilize the space in the Charahoe Middle School, as well as how you're going to address the facility needs for the elementary schools that are almost 100 years old, because they can't adequately address the needs of the education, even with our current students. So, and this is conversations I'm more than happy if there is a lack of trust of people of what I say, I'm more than happy to ask RIDE to do a special session on a weekend or a night where they can inform you how that process would work. It would entail, more dollars into the budget regarding stage 1 and stage 2, because you have to put together an architect and a schematic and a rendering of how that would look, how you would move the population. So, and you can only do that twice a year, September and February. So I shared the same thing that I shared with Ms. Purcell a few years ago. I shared that with Ms. Dinsmore. While I think, just so everybody knows, I also explained that over half the middle schools in the state are 5 to 8. And Dr. Camilla actually shared data with, and you've all seen the same data, the data with Ms. Dinsmore that actually shows some of the different improvements. I'm sure we can probably share that again for reminders about our middle school. Overall, there is no middle school that's going to show large. It's a different type of time of learning, and our adolescents, the brain, I'm sure if you're like me, a nerd about the brain and executive functioning, they're still frontal lobe. And they're doing things when they say to you, I don't know why I did that. Oftentimes it's true, because they're still, growing and maturing in that age. However, with that being said, we've heard that, should fifth graders be on the bus with seniors? Most seniors don't ride the bus. Most juniors don't ride the bus. So we had those kinds of conversations. And actually, if you've been to Charahoe Middle School, you know that our kids do not matriculate with each other. So the grade 5 stays in the grade 5 hall, the grade 6 stays in the grade 6 hall, the grade 7 stays in the grade 7 hall, the grade 8 stays in the grade 8 hall. They do not merge in between. The lunches are separated. So I want to say the fifth grade's it's been quite a while. Mr. Zanian would know better than I would know as the middle school principal, but it's a seamless transition. It's often harder sometimes for the parents to be able to have that adjustment of transition. No different than when they go to high school. It's always hard to sort of see your babies start to grow up and worry about the big fish in the little pond and the little fish in the big pond. But they do really well. And I think if you talked, and actually, even if we asked some of our fifth graders to come to talk about that transition, it might be helpful information for the school committee to have, because they sincerely do enjoy their time. But overall, there's a lot to discuss regarding that. It's not a quick, it couldn't happen in FY26, but conversations would have to happen first. If you wanted to do that, you'd have to increase the budget. So I'm not sure that's something, because you have to show different plans. And if we add that, we can add that to the elementary planning, but it would have to now include the middle school, where you'd have to then show how you plan on using the middle school. So the budget that we have currently would have to then be modified based on the architecture. So I think it's like a little over 1 million to do the renovation and or new construction. Our renovation plan will not be able to meet the needs of our grade 5 going back into the elementary schools. That's not possible. But you could create a stage 2 application for the elementary, including grade 5, but you'd have to increase the cost of the engineering and architecture, because RIDE would require the renderings, and they would require a detailed analysis. So on how you were planning on doing that, as well as the fact that the district has spent 5 years debating this, and this is the 5th time the school committee has not had an approved capital improvement plan, because there continued to be either one was rejected, this current one, and recently they've been pulled because of lack of community support. And I went through the presentation, and that's been going on since 1975. So there's a long history of no support in the elementary schools. And our parents' largest complaint is that we focus more on main campus than we do on the elementary schools. And our elementary schools are failing. So that's, basically a gist.
Okay. Thank you for that update. Laura?
Thank you. So I just want to kind of piggyback on a couple of different things. As far as what Luis has said about the big picture type of view on how we address the financials, because the cost of everything is going to continue to rise. I think everybody's well aware of that. And when I look at the implications that are associated with having fifth graders in middle school, so just a little history. My daughter goes to Charahoe. She's been in the elementary school.
I just want to caution for the OMA that we can talk about the building plan stage 1 and stage 2, but we want to avoid the fact that this is a budget workshop. So we just really need to be careful, because we have already 4 to 5 OMA complaints. So just I would focus on your conversation around the budget piece.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
So with that being said, so my daughter, she went through the middle school to the high school. And I think that there's, and just again, just being involved with all of the parents, students, things like that, there's a lot of feedback that comes from the students once they get into high school and how they feel about things in retrospect. And I think that that would be valuable information for the committee. The impact that that has on the financials, if you look longer term. So Charahoe Middle School, we have 2 deans currently at our school. There's, from the data that's posted on RIDE, it appears that there's very few middle schools that have 2 deans on staff. And that's, that's all available on their website. And I think that when we start looking at the costs, the implied costs of having, 10 and 11-year-olds moving into the high school, or I'm sorry, into the middle school in 5th grade, there's a stage of development that happens. The concrete development goes until about 5th grade, and you can kind of see these hidden costs is what I would call, whether, having to do with mental health, requiring more guidance counselors on staff, having 2 deans, 2 disciplinary deans, all these different things. And I don't see how, with the mental health crisis that is going on in our country, it's very real what our kids are going through. And, pushing them into middle school with all of the other signs that we are seeing as a community and as a society, I think that there can be long-term cost savings when it comes to the budget if we start discussing a sort of bigger picture look at, okay, well, if we did move the 5th graders back into the elementary schools, and there's a lot of parental support around this, a lot of community support, what would that look like? And what would be the long-term impact? Because I think that from a fiscal standpoint, it makes sense if we can come up with a stage 2 application that we can address this type of thing. I firmly believe if you compare our schools to other schools in Rhode Island, that you would start to see a decrease in some of the other additional services that have been added on to our budget from, over these last however many years since the kids have been in the middle schools. I believe it was in the early 90s that decision was made. So that's just my take on it. That's my recommendation. I think as a committee, we should all work together to try to get our heads wrapped around this and figure out a way that we can solve this problem. Because I truly believe that, having our 5th graders on buses with high schoolers, regardless of whether they're seniors, juniors, sophomores, it's an entirely different environment. And it has implications that I think are very far-reaching.
So just to clarify, that's the reason why you don't see 2 deans is because they use administrators, 1 administrator per 200 students, and it's a much higher cost to hire an administrator than to utilize a dean. As your educational liaison, I can tell you I would never put the safety of our students at risk. And I can also tell you that both deans, you should never request to cut a position, honestly. You should request dollars in an area, because that's why you hire me, to be able to make sure that I can do the strategic plan. In a time where school shootings, at a time where parents are worried about harassment, bullying, and the things that come along with middle school, I would never recommend the removal of a dean. So I'm just going to say that because I do think you will infringe upon the safety of our students and our staff. If you look at any one teacher, and if you want academic excellence, then you have to ask yourselves, what do you expect your principal and assistant principal doing? Because right now, they can be focused on teaching and learning and instruction. You're going to now, you want us to do more, and then you're saying remove the dean, so every discipline referral that comes to the office is now handled by the administration, who is now no longer in a classroom monitoring instruction. They're taking care of referrals. So again, this is where, when I appreciate the Chair Dinsmore stated about the collaborating with us, you know, myself, Mr. Zanian, Dr. Camella, the administrators, the teachers, the education work that we do, if there's a lack of trust in us to be able to understand how to put those pieces together, it's going to be problematic for the district. But the number one goal should be students, and the number one goal should be the fact that safety and security and teaching and learning are number one priorities, and I won't infringe on either. And I think the budget that I presented you is less than inflation, and it is my recommendation to move the district forward. But I'm not a proponent of infringing on children's safety.
I just want to say, if you don't mind, I don't think that there's a lack of trust. I just wanted to make sure that my intention in meeting with the team was, I just want to make sure that you feel that you're empowered to think, you know, outside the box, to move Charahoe forward. And that was my intention with the meeting, and to educate myself about the budget process. And, you know, as a,
Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't referring
no,
to.
I understand, but as somebody that's been on the opposite end of the table over the last 3 years, I just wanted to make sure that you felt supported, you and your team felt supported in doing what you felt that you needed to do to move the district forward, and while balancing the realities of, you know, our economy and, you know, our taxpayers. So I just wanted to make that statement. Okay, so Linda, Laura, and then Karen. Linda?
Thank you, Chair. I just want some clarification from the comments that Ms. Chapman made. I guess I'm a little confused because I believe that we need to look at being fiscally responsible. And I'm not against looking at moving the fifth graders. I'm one of the proponents that wanted to move the fifth, in conversation, why don't we move the fifth graders back to elementary school? But I'm not sure if that's something we want to get into the weeds for this budget. I think it's something that maybe I'd be happy to be on some sort of, you know, committee that looks at that moving forward. I don't know if there'll be cost efficiencies. But I'm not against it. I would support looking at it, but I'm not sure we want to get into the weeds right now in this particular budget, so there's not much we can do about it. And it will cost us some money, so I think we have to be cognizant of that too, that, you know, and sometimes you need to invest money to, you know, to get what you want out of something, but at the same time, I think we have to, you know, be fiscally, you know, sound and responsible.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Laura, and then Karen.
Thank you. I agree.
I think Karen should go before Laura, to be honest. Sorry, point of order. I just think Karen hasn't spoken yet and Laura has spoken. So if we're trying to let people have a chance to
Sure,
speak.
go ahead.
Yeah.
So my question is, this would be an increase to the budget with a stage
Right.
1 and a stage 2 application to develop a plan to possibly move the fifth grade back. What's the goal for that space that you're going to create at the middle school?
For me, I would rely on the superintendent to give us guidance on that, but I asked if
No,
there
no,
was.
no, no. Stop,
Madam
stop.
Chair, point of order.
Hold on.
Point of order.
Hold on.
It all shuts down. You got to answer this. Is this in this budget? Is moving the fifth grade back to the elementary school
No.
part of this budget?
We're getting in the weeds.
No, it's not. So we should not be discussing it. It should be part of a future agenda item.
Great. And I appreciate the point of order, and I would just ask that our conversations be respectful, and we just need to be, you know, cognizant of being respectful in our tone. Okay?
Now you have to rule on the point of order.
I-
Are you
I
going to push
accept-
this to go forward, or are you going to continue with the discussion?
I accept the point of order, and we could certainly move forward with the further discussion on the fiscal year 26
Thank you.
line items.
Let Karen.
So my question, I guess, is are we looking to increase the line item for capital to create a stage 1 and a stage 2 plan?
Well, I certainly think that that's open for discussion for, you know, I'm one vote of 12 people. So if the full committee is willing to have that discussion and entertain that, you know, I think we should talk about it. This is a budget workshop, so we should be talking about, you know, what the future of our district looks like in a budget workshop. But if we need to consider resources in fiscal year 26, this is what a budget workshop is about, is what our fiscal year 26 budget looks like. Okay. Donna?
Yeah. I'm going to bring this back to the budget. I would like to suggest, not necessarily tonight, but I would like to suggest considering increasing the fund balance in light of the fact of the news from today and the fact that we have received $3 million. This budget reflects $3 million in grants. Now, I don't know how much of that is federal grants, but it's quite possible that we would get zero amount of money in future budgets for grants. And that grant money funds some very important things, mental health particularly, some of our programs. So I would like to see a consideration of increasing the fund budget balance, the fund balance, okay? Greg, you might be able to work on that a little bit. It was recommended by the auditors that we increase it, and I'd like to consider that.
Thank you.
So for every, right now we have the fund balance at 2.25%. If you were raised it to 2.5%, you would have to add an additional, approximately an additional $160,475 to your budget. And then if you want to raise it to 2.75, you would have to double that number, and so on and so on.
And I would like to recommend considering that so that we do not jeopardize some of the programs that have been established through the grant money that we've received through Katie's wonderful work. So anyway, I'd like
Thank
to
you.
recommend that.
Anyone else? Are we ready to get into the weeds for fiscal year 26?
I welcome Laura to speak. I wasn't trying to cut her off from speaking. I just wanted to make sure that other folks got to speak before. So if she I don't want to make sure that she knows that.
Okay. Polly?
I'm not sure it will come up in this, but I had mentioned to you that when Sharon had brought up that we spent $6,000 on trophies, it doesn't bother me, but we have beautiful 3D printers in the drafting and design room, which I think a student could use those if they were so inclined to work with the drafting teacher and make some really cool trophies. At least put a little dent in that and work with a graphic design student, and they might be able to do a really neat project.
So I've explained that to Ms. Davis. Those are not for athletics. So that you would have to cut National Junior Honor Society, National Honor Society. Those are those awards. And those are two programs of academic excellence that you will have students who want to leave the high school. But if this committee would like to remove the National Honor Society and National Junior Honor Society, because that comes with a specific chapter, and that's not something, we can't take those
That's
logos.
not what she brought up the topic, but I was on a whole different topic entirely.
But that's the
That just
amount.
made me think of the trophies, and, I understand what you're saying, they're two different things, but this might help in that department.
Yeah,
if-
we
if
utilize it
there's-
whenever we can.
Yeah, and there's some really cool designs out there, and I think some kids could have fun working with the graphic design department back and forth. Maybe an independent.
Yeah, I mean, our students can do things on different scales, but large scales, especially if it's athletics you're talking about, the boosters often do help with that. That's often offset. But the line item that Sharon Davis brought up it's the National Honor Society, National Junior Honor Society. Those organizations, you cannot steal those logos and utilize them on your own. You have to you have to abide by the law.
Laura?
So, I have several questions directed for Greg, please. When I'm looking at so I'll just kind of explain this. So I took the 56-page budget that we were given at the initial budget presentation, that's available online for the public to view as well. And that was provided in Excel format, and so I essentially took that spreadsheet and exported everything and sort of created my own set of books in a sense, with each individual location. With that being said, I'm trying to figure out one of the pieces that was missing from at least from the data that I have, Greg, is the benefits packages. Can you explain how those are being allocated and how they end up into each individual salary and which code that they go to? Because it's the way that the UCOA codes are set up, there's a code that's listed for each individual school, and then there's a code that talks about that's for the program that's being identified. Then there's another set of numbers, so it's a massive string of numbers. But each one has an individual function.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, when you look at an employee, you have their salary, then you have their health care, then you have what we pay into the pension. And that is broken down into 2 different line items. So for each employee, you have 4, 5, or 6 lines if they work in one building. For every building they work in, you have to double or triple those lines. So if you have an employee that works in 3 buildings, every single time you pay them, you have to pay them what percentage they're in that building, and that percentage of their benefit package gets broken up into it, and then it's spread out. So because the codes require us to try to break it down to show how much each school is spending, eventually the state says they'll be able to compare apples to apples. They're not there yet. I don't know.
Actually, this is something that, if you remember Santiago Guerrero, he discussed, and you can actually go to the financial dashboard to sort of manipulate that information. Oftentimes, it helps us if we understand the why behind the question, like what are you hoping to see? It helps us figure out, because obviously all the salaries, there's family health care, then there's the independent health care, there's retirement, there's pension, there's fringe. That went up last year. So there's Social Security as well in the district.
Disability.
So, but to Greg's point, I understand you took it and you created your own books, but we have to present it to RIDE by school code. And just for the fun of it, and my UCOA gurus here, Lynn Guven, they update the UCOA every year. So for example, just an easy one for this year, the multi-language learner UCOA code is new this year because it's part of the funding formula. That didn't exist last year. So if you looked at last year's budget to this year's budget, it looks like there was nothing because there wasn't, because it didn't exist. So now you're going to have money there. Just like if you looked at your computer line and one question that, Ms. Dinsmore had, as well as Ms. Purcell that reached out, was it looked like the tech purchases went up. The tech purchases went up because we're no longer leasing because it cost too much, and the lease number went down. So asking us questions by line item, I think, one, helps understand it so that everyone understands why those things are happening, because then we can talk about it. But also, if we understand what it's hoping to accomplish, we could probably have a more productive conversation, because not everybody here is accountants, so I get that. And we don't all live in the financial world. So it's often helpful to sort of think through, like, this data will help us do what? And then we can probably help assist.
Okay, so,
Oh, go ahead, Laura.
So what I'm specifically referring to is on the 56-page budget that we have, all of the benefits, which I think is around 17 million roughly for 2026. Those,
I cannot hear you.
I was referring to the 56-page budget that we were given, and
Section 4?
I'm not sure which section it is.
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons why, if you go back to previous minutes for the DFM, Superintendent Ritchie never allowed the Excel document to go out. I do. But I did say to Ms. Chapman, and I said anyone who requested it, that we will not use anything that's not in the budget package. So I do need you to refer to the budget package for the purpose of the public transparency and the committee that doesn't have what you created.
Laura, on this one page, this personal, the employee benefits is 16,126. Maybe that's what you were thinking for 2026?
What page is that?
No,
It's on the overview page.
It's on this page.
Section
It's on the
2.
first page.
Yeah, it's on the first page.
I'll find exactly which page it is, and then I'll tell you where to go to. I'll resend in the meantime.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question about some line items, and forgive me if I'm repeating.
That's all right. Can you tell us what section you're in?
Absolutely. I'm in section 3,
Yep.
page 3. Line items 4816 and 4820. Purchasing services, conference workshop elementary, purchasing service, conference workshop middle school. So if you look at, just for the purposes of the public, if you look at fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 26, what's proposed, there was an increase from roughly $35,700 to almost $74,000. And so I'll take that line item first.
So that's the, your COA code change with the MLL conferences now have to be included in that specific line item versus an older line item. So with the MLL conferences, those are now coded differently per your COA, and it used to be separated out into different professional development, and it also includes the science professional development required for next year.
So this was in another line item before, and
The MLL conferences, yes, but the science is, we didn't have science PD last year. This is, for this new science, different grades go different years. So this is an increase in the number of grades that have to do their science PD.
okay. And that's the same for the middle school as well, that
The
line
middle
item?
school is the same thing, it's their science,
Okay.
professional development.
And Superintendent Picard, is that the same reasoning for line item 4835?
No, 4835 is contractual for the computer tech and cybersecurity.
Okay. So just for purposes of the public, it doesn't look like there was a line item for that in fiscal year 23, and proposed for fiscal year 26, it's $7,500.
Yep. So there are some times where the techs, our finance, computer director, data analysis, and our computer administrators don't utilize it, but sometimes it's contractual. So they have if they don't utilize it, that they, sometimes it's what's available, they may already know it, but but now with the cybersecurity concerns that have been going on, there was an increase for next year.
Okay. I have a few others, unless somebody, other folks, I have a number of line item questions. Pat?
I want to stay in the same section and go to line item 596, salary development officer.
Section 3, did you say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, same section. You're making it easier so we're not flipping back and forth all over the place. And 699, salary overtime. So I'd like to go over what those are specifically.
What was the first number you said?
It was 596, salary development officer.
Salary development?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Katie.
That's Katie Karakuzian, the Director of Development Sustainability. She was paid through grants at the beginning, and then we've weaved her into the operating budget.
All right.
She brought in $3.3 million this year alone.
All right, and the other one is 699, salary overtime.
I believe 699 is the custodial because it was in purchasing contracts, and now actually we're down. We had 9 vacancies at the beginning of the year, and down to 3 or 5. 5.
So, I mean, are we working on eliminating that overtime? I mean, how,
Typically, the overtime is coming in when we are down because of sickness, or we have recreation department. You all remember that they all came because they want to use the facilities. So in order for us to stay open for basketball and rec, if somebody needs to do that, we have to put in a custodian. And because we had the number of vacancies we have, but with the change, we're already seeing us filling those spots. So that line item, hopefully next year, will be down because of that. But that line is up, but the purchase services line is down in that area because we were contracting out at a much higher rate.
now, I do remember that we had voted on a per diem. I know that Ned just want to know, we never heard how that worked out, if it worked out.
So we actually had a couple of school employees who were parents and educators here that took advantage of it, but we only had a couple. But hey, 2 is better than none.
Thank you.
While we're on that, can I just ask a question about that same line?
You just need to be recognized by the chair. So Jess and then Laura. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I had noticed similar and thought, well, we did change the contract, raise the rate. I think it'd be great if we could get that lower. But my question was about, so if you're a custodian working overtime, that would, so say you're like second shift, so you're in the building after hours anyways, you couldn't tend to a game or like an event. You couldn't have the same custodian be working in the school and be at an event. Is that true, or? Do you understand what I'm
no,
asking?
you-
We do,
We do, but sometimes that person is the one that calls out sick.
Okay,
but you also have to remember the custodian who's tending to the game is also trying to clean the building.
right, that's what I'm.
At the same time.
But so that person would not be overtime. You don't need that person and an overtime custodian.
No, if we have,
When
if,
you're down 9 custodians, it's very likely the person who's
Right.
doing that is working
Already
overtime.
overtime, right,
Correct,
right. But ideally, you could have someone working that
correct.
shift who could also cover a game. I was
Yeah,
just
we haven't-
curious if there were
Yeah.
double, if you had to do both at the same time.
no, there's nothing that stops us from doing that.
Okay.
If it's the regular, but again, it depends on the number, it depends on what's happening. Like a game versus practice is very different.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Laura?
So this is on page 20 of the 56-page budget. It starts on page 20. Section 4. So if you look at the grade area, the shaded area on that page, it shows all of the different types of benefits, the health, wellness, life, dental, et cetera. And what I was asking was how, if the district is able to provide us, or your team is able to provide us with where those go to, because that's $16 million in benefits. And when I'm looking at the salaries that are up here, sometimes it's challenging to allocate, because I mean, I have no idea which portion of this can be allocated.
So my understanding is that this has always been presented this way, because if we start to break this up, you're going to go into confidentiality issues. You would actually be listing employees, you would see their names, and you would also know what their benefits are, whether or not they're on their family plan or individual plan, and we're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, we can give you the
Right.
big picture, the salary.
Well,
but-
yeah, I wasn't asking for, you don't need to do individual names, but if the code for benefits, just as an example, if you have,
So for example, benefits health, if we break that down anymore, you're starting to get into individual names.
so there's no way for us to have that information or to be able to know.
Not
to
individual,
know
that's something we have, I mean, that's an employee, even I don't see personal information because the human resources administrator takes that. So for example, even when one of our personnel goes on FMLA, that's not done for me because it's privacy.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is that, for example, the salary development officer, that UCOA code is, it's 10-25005110. There's a second UCOA code that would be tied to the salary development officer that would be 52 would be the starting string number. Is that correct, Lynn? So that's what I'm referring to. That, is there a way to
That's an
receive
administrative
that?
position you're asking up. So there's the contract. So if you want to go to the certified contract, you can go through their benefits appendix and that'll explain the benefits that they receive. If you look at the ESP contract, that'll go through the benefits available to them as well. You'll notice in the ESP contract, their healthcare benefits are very, very expensive. And the majority of their salary is benefits. But the contract is where you'll get that sort of information about what they receive or what they can access as contractual. Administrative contracts are individual, which is why, for example, myself or Kitty, we would be specific out because we have separate individual contracts that are voted on in public. The contracts for the ESP and certified, that's what's voted on in public, and that's what we can provide publicly.
Did you have any follow-up, Laura?
Only that I would would request that information, that's all, is,
It's the contracts are online. Just go to District TAD and contracts. All the contracts are there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jess?
All of these line items, benefit, wellness, benefit, life, we can't change these through the budget process. They're all contractual, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. So there were some other line items that I had questions about. Some of these actually mirror Counselor Davis's sheet that she gave us last week during the omnibus. So I had a couple of questions. I hope you don't mind my indulging your response to these, some of these line items.
Are you in section 4?
I'm back to section 3.
That's all right.
Laura gets in the weeds because this is her speak, but,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so there's some supply lines. Line item 5931. Supplies, says child outreach. It went from about $1,000 up to $3,000.
Do you want me to go one by a time?
Sure.
So the child outreach, we do have an increase in, that's for pre-K ages 3 through 5. We're required by law to service any student at the age of 3 that needs specialized services. 3 through 5 is considered, 3 through 5 before they start kindergarten is pre-K. So that is the child outreach person and the need for walk-in services, and that level has increased significantly over the last 3 years. I'll put it out there, but please, everyone just take a breath. The pre-K tuition has been reviewed for 5 years. There has been no appetite to increase the pre-K tuition. We are the cheapest pre-K in the state.
So are you making a recommendation?
I am not making a recommendation.
Okay.
My recommendation you already have.
All right, so just going down that sheet, line items 5962, textbook workbooks elementary.
Right, that's the curriculum, but that's part of the mandated law for the elementary schools.
Okay, so just for the public's edification, in fiscal year '23, that line item was just over 5,000. And for proposed for fiscal year 2026, it's proposed 83,000 plus. So
Do you
that's the
mind if
main
I
band.
ask- I'm going to ask Dr. Camella to explain. We have many contracts that are working, so they're at different years. So to save costs, he's been able to manage that, so I'm going to have him sort of review. That, Mike, that one was, the last one was the inter-reading for elementary school.
So
Thank you.
so what we do is, I think the last contract we had with Interreading was maybe 22, 23, which is why you don't see a significant cost there. And we paid for it through ESSER, so the majority of it.
Right, that was a school committee request to move it into ESSER.
So we've ended that contract. We typically do 3-year contracts with our vendors. So we're up, and that's the proposed, proposal we got from the vendor. And so you won't see, and what we've negotiated with, without getting into specifics about vendors, is sometimes they allow us to do a percentage one year and a percentage the next to offset costs. So you don't see a bulk in one year and then you don't, you're paying upfront. So next year you'll see it significantly reduced because we've already entered into the contract.
Thank you. Other questions? Laura and Jess.
Okay, so in section 4. Wait till everybody gets there. Section 4, page 14. Oh, I thought it was page 14. Yeah, page 14, line item 598. There is it looks like there's a credit or some sort of allocation that gets made it's listed as a salary reduction. And in 2025, that offset was 420,000. And in 2026, it's 190,000, which leaves, what's that, 190,000 is the delta. What is that, Greg?
That's all schools. So what happens is when you have salary step increases or decreases, people change, and that just captures the changes from year to year. So for example, we may have had a retirement, top step, somebody may have resigned, somebody may take the position, and the different steps come in. So overall, that's the shift that happens.
So Laura, for example, if you have a third step speech pathologist resign, it's very unlikely we're going to hire someone at third step for that position. You're going to wind up hiring that 10th step. So a
they'll
third.
get hired 'cause
a
it's a
third step
high-need area
teacher
right
may
now
be
in the
making
state.
55,000, where a top step is making much more. So you have to build in for that. We don't know who will resign. You know, people get married, they move, they leave teaching. So that is you have to build in for that, that fluctuation.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Jess?
So I was going to say, what I did when I looked through the budget is I was looking for certain line items that have increased more than double since FY '23. So that's something that I have some specific line items, but overall I was asking if there was a way to see all of them at once, so I wouldn't have to go line by one and bother Gina. And I know, you know, from experience, there is typically a reason why something has increased more than it seems like it should, or why it has decreased more than that amount. But that's something I've been looking at. And the other thing I've been looking at is professional development. It comes up a lot. I know some of it is mandatory, but it seems like we have to pay for professionals to take it. Sometimes we have to pay for the conference. Sometimes we have to pay for the mileage to get to the PD. It seems like it's layers of paying for professional development. And I'm not trying to discredit that. I think it's very important that our educators and our staff stay in a learning process so that they can deal with new challenges and they can deal with changes in curriculum. But that's something I'm also interested in taking a bigger look at. But overall, when I'm looking at the budget, the one-page budget, which we just received the increases from preschool.
Yeah, do you mind if I just explain
Yeah,
that?
please, that'd be great.
So on Friday afternoon, we received correspondence from the Department of Education that the pre-K allocation originally in the Governor and Ride's review of the budget was counted, they were counting pre-K students as all full-time students, which is not the case across the state. This was not just a Charahoe thing, they did it for the entire state. So as many of you know, we only have one classroom of full-time pre-K, and then we have the remaining classrooms with part-time pre-K. So then they informed us, it hasn't been updated yet, but they informed us that we would have to recalculate, and they will be updating those numbers in March, but that we should take that into account when budgeting. So that the finance team went back to the table, and then we did the numbers yesterday, and then reviewed them again today to ensure that we agreed that that would be what we stand at now. And that is why there's new pages for anybody in the audience over there. But that put the budget as an overall increase of 2.65% after state aid, which is still under inflation, so still part of that. But based on that new email, that has been updated. Professional development, all the professional development that we do is contractual and mandated. We haven't been able to do anything different. Just to give you a sense. But
Yeah.
Dr. Camella, myself, and Mr. Zanian, along with the other superintendents across the state, we're going to be, because the question of underfunded and unfunded mandates have come out. So if it's okay, may I pass this on?
Please.
So this was created by our legal counsel firm and to help assist. There are not dollar amounts, but we're going to be working on ways as a cohesive group of superintendents and business offices to give this information to school committees. So we're all pulling from the same UCOA, but this will give you a sense of unfunded and underfunded mandates for the public. Once the school committee reviews, I'm going to be posting this on our FAQ tomorrow, so you'll be able to access this via our website.
So Gina, my question to you is this acceptable to pass out to the committee, even though this wasn't necessarily put into our materials that
Yes,
we?
it just be, once I pass something out, it becomes public, so people can now request it, which is why it will be linked to the FAQ tomorrow for all to see.
Thank you. So just to piggyback on that question about the new information that now affected the budget, where is that change specifically reflected in this one pager?
So if you go to section 2, your one pager, and if you go down to where you see all the way at the bottom, percentage increase contribution to district after state aid. So, the left of that column, the one for Charlestown, for example, 1,500,440, that number changed, which changed your percentage. And then, I believe Richmond changed, and I'm not positive, I think Hopkinton stayed the same.
Yeah, so it's the.
Hopkinton stayed
yeah.
the same, because it did not impact their, funding.
Yep, the majority of our pre-K students, you may remember that I explained this to you, are from Richmond and Charlestown. So the biggest impacts will be to those two districts because it's based on enrollment of the pre-K student, where that pre-K student resides.
Okay.
So there's 56 pre-K students that they, budget wrong for.
Okay, so I know Larry has a question. If I may just follow up on my question, Larry? Yep. So if we're looking at the fiscal year 25-26 column, what you just referenced, Mr. Zenyan.
Yes.
So Richmond, state aid to education received by towns. Now, that figure has changed and fairly significantly. And the Hopkinton line item has changed also fairly significantly. Am I reading that correctly?
Richmond was at 3.10%, and now it's 3.7. And Hopkinton was 241. Thank you. And now it is at 3.24.
Okay, thank you. Larry?
One,
Hold on, oh, go ahead.
just
May I-
very related to that, I'm curious if you have the number, like the money number for the reallocation. How much money did you have to add back or take out from state aid?
Stand
We do
by.
have it, it's in
Yeah,
the
we're allowed,
worksheet.
we can take a breath. You got a second. Sorry, Lynn.
All right, I'll ask Larry to ask his question until Lynn is able to get that information. Thank you, Lynn.
Just for Greg, in revenue,
So section 5?
no, the first page,
Okay,
Ron,
yep.
where you got 7605. The last update we had was, get the right pages here, you got so many of them here now, was 7611. And the bottom number is 61,518. It was 61,513. If you had a $5,000 reduction, how come the number went up and not down?
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to check that, because we plugged in the new number with,
Yeah.
revenue into the formula.
That's 5,694 difference.
Yeah, we definitely get that back to you. We'll
Thank
find
you,
out.
Larry.
All right, you're welcome.
Thanks. Any other questions? Laura?
Under, Greg, can you tell me what is a claims and settlements? There's a line item that I couldn't figure out. It's not in 2026, so I'm just wondering if maybe you have more information on it. It looks like it's an insurance item? Is that?
Where are you speaking about?
It is on, let's see, it's on section 4. And it is row number 6,349.
Literally the end, the last page. Of the 53.
It is 6,000. Section 4, 6,349.
It's like the second to last line.
Oh, that's
Claims and
RGB
settlements.
litigation.
That's what I thought.
Thank you.
But that's not for this year. That was transferred out. That was FY '24.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure it's not in this budget. It was 2 budgets ago.
And then can you also, advise I believe that we started the 2 deans that we had for the middle school, that was originally paid for by ESSER funds, is that correct?
No.
No.
So I was at the middle school 20 years ago with 2 deans.
Okay.
And then probably 8 or 9 years ago, they cut to 1.2 deans.
And you have 1.2 deans.
They made someone a .8
.2
or
means 1
.2.
day.
So it was, and then that wasn't working either, and they went down to 1 dean. And I will tell you, it did not work. As the principal of the building, I handled almost every single bullying investigation. I handled probably 40% of the discipline. And so you basically paid the principal to do a dean's job. And I was not able to do my job. Many things slipped because that building will not run with 1 dean unless you, in my opinion, unless you increase administrators.
Yeah, I like the idea of talking about that conversation, and I would recommend talking with the teachers about the difference and what that looked like. I can also provide data about the number of discipline referrals and how we've actually decreased. Now, that doesn't mean you get rid of the dean, it means it's working. So when we look about return on investment, when students have access to adults who, and again, it's not about punishment, it is about understanding consequences of decisions, but changing behavior to improve your behavior. And when we have people focused on that work to support our teachers in their classrooms with the deans, then you're going to have better teaching and learning environments, more structure and time for your administrators who are teaching and learning. So again, to Greg's point, there has always been 2 deans in the middle school. When it was removed, my first year here, the buildings were half empty because of COVID, so I didn't do anything about it. But then when kids all came back, it was very easy to see that that was a hardship. And then, to your point, Louise, my job, by the school committee is the teaching and learning, and there was definitely an impasse between what we could accomplish if we did not put back that dean. I put it in the operating budget, and it was moved to ESSER because that was the decision.
So I do have the numbers for the pre-K.
Thank you.
With, thank you, Lynn. So what Lynn and I did is we took the 54 students that we know are going to be pre-K next year, and we just assumed all 54 would be part-time. 8 to 10 will probably be full day, but it's better to budget, assuming they're all part-time, because that's probably where the state is going to start our funding. It was a decrease of $17,217 to Charlestown, a decrease of $94,499 to Richmond, and a decrease of $130,640 to Hopkinton, for a total decrease in state aid of $242,357.
200.2,
242,357.
357, 242, 357.
Didn't tackle any of this.
Okay, are there any more questions from the committee at this time?
Sorry, can I just, I'm trying to figure out if there's a more efficient way to do this. Because I have so many questions, and in an effort not to keep everybody here until, midnight tonight, I'm just wondering if the administration can advise if there's an easier way to tackle this.
I mean, honestly, the best way, especially about the conversations around the budget, while it seems tedious, the best way is to ask the questions in public so everybody hears the question and everybody hears the response.
Okay. Okay. So then I'll just go to the next line item then. This is on, excuse me,
Are you in section 4 or 3?
I'm in section 4. So I know that you had mentioned that the salary development officer is.
She's just a development officer.
So she's the
That's her
Director of
salary.
Development and Sustainability.
Okay, So I'm just looking at that increase though, the 320% increase. Is that one person? I guess that's what I'm having trouble understanding on that. Because in 2024, the amount for the development officer is, it looks like it fluctuates between like around 40,000, and then in 2026, it's 105,000.
But because I explained, part-time of it was paid through the grant. So even still now, so the more grants Katie brings in, we can refer some of that into in-kind services. So oftentimes we can offset that, but it is right now, that's what our salary costs. And if we can get savings based on the grants that we bring in through the in-kind service, then that's how we do it.
I guess what I'm saying, is there a way to be able to see what the actual cost is? Because it sounds like what you're saying is that the reason that the numbers in 2023, 2024, and 2025 are significantly lower is because there was some sort of offset to that?
Project
Is that
Aware,
correct?
correct.
Okay.
It's a grant.
And so is there more positions within our school where that happens?
No.
Or is that just a one-off thing?
That's a one-off.
Thank you. And then the next line item is also in section 4, the salary, it looks like the clerks.
Page,
It's line 427. And just looking at that increase for 2025, the adjusted amount is 39,511.51, and then for fiscal year 26, it is 88,679. So I'm just
vacancies.
Okay, so that's where the 193% increase comes from. Is
Correct.
You're filling those vacancies.
Correct.
And how
We had-
many clerks does that equate to?
Probably 2. The 39 is 1, the 88 is about 2, and based on the benefits package. But as many of you know, the TAs and the custodians are hardest to fill because of the pay rate. Now that we have changed the contract, actually, we're almost, like I said, we're down to 3 custodians. No, I'm sorry, I keep saying 3. There's 5 custodians left, but we started at 11, and right now, I believe all our TAs are filled, but we do have 2 out on medical leave.
Okay.
But yes, you'll see, there's significant adjustments in the lines like clerks, TAs, and custodians because of vacancies.
Being filled.
Say it again?
Vacancies being filled.
Correct, vacancies being
Right.
filled, correct.
And so do we know how long those vacancies are, how long they're there for? I guess that's kind of another question that I was trying to wrap my head around was if the school is just at the administrative level, as an example, if there's vacancies, how long do they stay open for?
Until they're filled.
Until they're filled.
But I mean, what's the time frame on a typical vacancy, like for a clerk?
We're working on a school year and we're still down 5.
Typically, for example, like clerks, one of the concerns that have happened is every time we fill the position, everyone's looking for people. URI pays a lot more than we do, and they're 15 minutes away, and we continue to lose clerks to them. And so I could ask Kristen Merritt, but I want to say, as fast as we brought them in is as fast as they left.
Okay. Thank you. The next line item is row 5,472, also in section 4.
5,000 what?
5,472. And so for this line item in particular, what I was looking at was, it's showing from 2024, which would be 6/30/24, that there's a 47% increase
Yep.
in the insurance error and omissions. Can you
That's our
advise what
trust.
that is?
That's our liability insurance, and we've had increase in concerns.
That's your liability insurance? And it went up by 47%?
Yeah, just the cybersecurity alone is an increase. And we won't have, actually, I think, and then we're estimating, although the official rate will come in April.
Yes.
And how often does the district shop out those policies? Just out of curiosity.
By law, it's every 3 years.
You're required to, and you're required to have 3 bids minimum?
No,
Or we can use the MPA.
we're required to go out to bid. We're not required to have 3 bids. We wouldn't fill multiple bids
Right.
if we were required to have 3.
Sorry, maybe I misspoke. Maybe I meant 3 quotes from 3 different.
So when you go out to bid, you open your bids and then you pick.
But sometimes it's one bidder.
Sometimes you only get
You
one
can't
bid.
guarantee the number of bidders.
Okay.
You send it out. So we work on the state building site. So in the past, before they created that site, you would try to find 3 people who did that service and send them your bid. Now with the state portal, which Kathy so wonderfully manages, anybody can see it. All of the bids on the state are up all the time.
Right.
So the law had, they fixed that so that we wouldn't have to be figuring out who to send bids to. And then people are responsible to go on and search and see the bids that get posted. You can subscribe and get notifications.
Okay, but that's the same process for if you're doing an insurance policy quote?
The only time we don't have to go out to bid is legal counsel, dental and physical, and your doctors for this district.
Okay.
And that's in the state law.
Okay. The next line item is row 6,326. And this one is, it says professional organization fees for a school committee. And I'm just wondering what that is.
Rhode Island Association of School Committees and your conference fees and dues.
That you're talking about RIASCUS, the thing that her and I went to, isn't
Well,
that?
that's a conference, but
I
it's
was there
also, you're also part of the organization to receive all the information and to be able to attend.
And so how much is that per person, per committee member?
You know, that's for the committee.
Okay, so then the additional costs that are associated with going to the conferences, that's in addition to, there's an additional
Correct.
cost to that? And is that a contracted thing?
Nope, that's up to you guys. If you want to access those services and those supports and that information, you've got to be part of the organization. That has nothing to do with the students or me.
Okay,
I know other districts have taken it off, and after 1 year, they put it back on because then they don't have access to the materials. That's a huge decision.
okay.
You may want to look at that organization before you make decisions. For example, the Principals Association gives each principal $1 million liability insurance. So that association may insure you as a member of this committee.
They do.
They do. I'm a member of the Committee on Health Products.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Laura, for now? Okay, any other questions from the committee before we open it up to the community? Okay, Jess and Larry.
So these are all line items that I've already shared with Gina, but since we're going through line items, we're gonna do that. So in the 9-page, oh, and we already did that, the child outreach coordinator, I was curious about what that was. 506, I was curious about what the academic fellow is.
So the academic fellow is in the teacher's contract. It's negotiated and it's aligned, has to be aligned to the strategic plan of the district. Currently, we're in it's a literacy fellow, moving next year to our multi-tiered systems of support, which is the complete alignment to be able to move our district strategic plan forward. It was literacy fellow because we had to increase our level of writing across the district. So that's why it became K through 12 literacy. And now with that focus, we're moving into multi-tiered systems of support. And for that position has been very, very beneficial to the district. For those of you that have been here long enough, when I first started, you had it as a distance learning fellow or a digital learning fellow. And prior to that, for 7 years, there was someone in it for the technology initiative of the one-to-one initiative. And that was about 6 to 7 years. I think it kept rolling for a while because it was a large initiative to phase into the district.
And these are current educators who apply for an extra position? or-
Correct. So it's an educator that was a longstanding veteran teacher who, it's an interview position. It is monitored by Dr. Camella. And he has an interview team that selects that individual. And then the individual's position is held for them per the contract, and another individual takes their position as and you'll see that in next month's when we have to review leave of absences, non-renewals, and terminations.
And so this is, how many positions is this?
One.
One, okay. Next. The cafeteria plans,
Line item?
line item.
4749.
4749.
You want me to?
It's just, it's $750, but it just wasn't in there. Now it's been in there the last couple of years, so I just was curious what that was.
It's contractual. It's for the dependent care. It hasn't been utilized in 2 years. However, we have to, per the contract, we have to budget for it each year.
Okay, 4928, that is purchase services. You may have mentioned this actually.
I did, yes. Yep, it's
I
the
just was
UCOA
curious
change.
what the
Yep.
increase, that was the UCOA change, okay.
And it's now it's a middle school science, math, and reading curriculum course.
Okay. 5008, this is the oil spill monitoring.
Yeah,
This has
sometime.
been happening for a very long time.
It has been. We actually, we should be due for an update shortly. We have an update every year, and no, they have told us we still are not ready to remove the process. As long as that barrel has anything in it, that's what happens. But the department, I can, if the committee so chooses, you can add it to the future agenda. Typically, somebody usually asks for every other year. The previous ones, I can send you what we have, and I can ask Mr. Zenian if that's something people want to see, the update, but we still have to address the oil spill, and this is the cost.
Would it be less money to perform remediation? Is there anything we could do?
They go through that with us.
Okay.
This is what the recommendation is. Not my wheelhouse with the oil spill, but again, if it helps to have that conversation again, I'm more than happy to have them come back.
Okay. 5099, ground services. I was curious what that increase was. It was
So this is our
27
mowing, fertilizer, irrigation, snow plowing, sanding. When we need additional support, I can tell you, we have received several complaints from coaches and parents regarding the concerns of the fields. So we are trying to mitigate that as fast as we can, but we have to ensure that our athletes don't risk injury. So, kind of counterpoint to this, some of you have seen, there has been a Charahoe Cowboys request to use our football field. We have lacrosse, field hockey, soccer, football, and we do not have turf. So that field takes a beating. And even what I'm putting in this budget, I don't think is going to be enough to bring that field and all our fields where they really should be, but we're doing our best. And if the committee wants more, I told the parents, it would be great if they want to come to speak to you about their concerns, and I've asked them to do that if they so choose.
Okay.
But when I spoke to Jason Sullivan and the athletic director, this was the budget we coordinated, and Mr. Zenian, to ensure at minimum we have at least, basic standards of safety.
I feel like it comes up every year, but the rental 5362, the cost of the Ryan Center, it's gone up again, but it
It's
still is.
listen, it costs us more to do it here than
Right.
it costs
Yeah.
at
And
the
it's
Ryan
pretty
Center.
open, there's a lot of space, there's a lot of parking.
Right, and I have to say, the nice thing about it is we don't have to turn away any families where some of my superintendent colleagues who use like the vets, they get 2 per family, 3 per family. Our families can bring in 20, 50, 100 people. The venue covers the security, it covers the before, during, and after. It's well-managed, and like I said, it's a venue that, actually, I think the only district in this region that's not using it, I believe, is Wesley, because they use their football field.
Okay, they do it outside in a tent. You still have to
No
pay
tent.
for. No, okay, right. But you pay for the police, probably a lot of police and.
I can go back and share with you
One
how
at a
much we
time.
paid, but we had to do the COVID one, and there was only 4 allowed per person, because you can only have so many parking spaces, and
AC's nice in June.
Yeah, right.
and you don't have to cross your fingers for the rain.
So have you already gotten a quote from the Ryan Center for next
Yes,
year?
we have a 3-year contract.
Okay, great.
5768, supplies medical, that was up 69.58%.
Yep, in the past, we have, and actually, Ms. Sinsma asked this question as well. We've been able to receive donations. We are required to have our EpiPens in our to-go bags. A to-go bag is an emergency where we might have to evacuate when we are, as well as the clinic and as well as 2 other areas. Typically, it's the cafeteria near the gymnasium or the auditorium to be able to ensure that we are ready for a diabetic emergency.
Who typically donates? Is it
I have to go back to double check, but
CVS.
we've been, usually,
Seniors, you said?
CVS, that was it,
I
thank you.
donated for years.
Got it. So 6112, this is e-textbooks for the library. You believe you had said that students have access to e-textbooks on their Chromebooks, but they also have the e-textbooks in the library.
Right, it comes with the library budget because it's accessed through multiple, so if it's not specific to a department, oftentimes it's allocated through the library, so across departments, because RIDE requires us to do it by department. So if it's allocated for ELA or for math, so if it's in library, it can be accessed across content. So at 6112, you want to,
No, 6012.
oh, 6012, you want to know specifically what that is?
That's the e-textbooks for the library, it says.
Yep, it is the, it was update for the school curriculum, and it was an increase of, I believe, 2,257. It's biannual, it's not, it's not every year, which is why it shows the increase. So it's every
Got it.
other year is the, you have to update it.
Okay. 6216. There's a 327.76% increase for technology hardware district.
Yep, that one, actually, Ms. Davis, Ms. Sinsmore, and you all asked about that one. That's the tech hardware purchasing we used to rent, which actually would cost us money in leasing and taxes. So the rental code is, actually, that line is down, and this code is up because it's a new UCOA as well.
Oh, sorry, I remember you mentioned.
No problem.
Okay, so now I'm going to the 56-page budget. 5529.
You're throwing me off your list. 'cause you're looking
DCY,
at-
no, that's the
Oh,
DCY.
DCYF tuition.
Yeah, so this is something I'm keep trying to understand because we pay money to DCYF so that students that are in their custody can go to school and be transported and all that, which is wonderful, necessary. But typically, when we are paying money, when a student is coming somewhere, we get a tuition for that student. It seems like we're giving money, but who's getting the tuition?
The residential placement.
So
It's a group home.
not a school.
No,
No school gets the money.
no, DCYF utilizes the funding to support the services of the student, correct?
Okay, but no school that has the student gets that tuition, like,
No,
so
the DCY, we
the
pay
money
DCYF.
follows the student, but not to a school. Like, that's kind of what I'm trying to, where is
and
the
that's in
money?
the state law.
At the school?
So there's actually a funding formula. This is the area where I explained to you when I first arrived here. Charahoe's ask was about 55,000, and now it's over 90,000.
Right. But they're still not going back into a school.
Correct. Not yet.
Find that just,
No, they're in the.
the child's going to a school, but no school is getting the tuition, it seems like, from what I
Right,
understand.
the DCYF tuition is based on the students who are in specific placements out of, yes.
Karen, did you have a comment?
Just, so the tuition just goes back to the state? Like the money we pay
No,
goes
they
to?
utilize that cost to support the group home that they're in. It's not a school.
Oh, okay. You're paying for.
It's a residential
All right,
placement.
residential
So
place. All right.
technically
So-
you're paying for the residential place.
Yes.
Not for the schooling.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Required by law.
But someone also must be paying the tuition somewhere, it's just separate from this DCYF
We just
tuition.
absorb it.
I
Maybe it's
can talk
through-
to the Department of Ed if you want to have somebody come in from DCY, I have to explain, but
Right, I know.
it's a formula that we've all, it's what the
very
state
opaque.
legislation comes up with.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna keep trying to understand that,
Like,
Better.
right?
So I think we just absorb that cost.
right?
The school tuition cost, we absorb it.
Yeah.
'Cause we pay for the group home.
And it's not unique to Charo. This happens all around the state,
But
right?
the cost is different. So every district, based on the legislated formula, is provided different costs. So Providence's cost actually is a much cheaper cost just because of the way the formula works. So they're paying, say, $55,000, where South Kingstown's paying $115,000, and we're paying $90,000. So there's different factors in your district that are added into that formula, and then the state tells you the tuition. And typically, I have not received it, but usually in January, I get some kind of a crazy update that says, your new bill is increased to this. I have not got that yet, and I'm hoping it doesn't come.
They sent it to Ned.
Okay.
Well,
Maybe.
could we,
Karen and then Pat.
sorry, I'm sorry, Pat. Could we ask that they change the date of the increase so that it matches our budget? Like it.
Yeah, I mean, I can also, we have gone through this, but I'm happy to, we've explained that, and I have been on calls with DCYF, with the Superintendent's Association and RIDE to discuss this, and it's one of those issues that, because it's legislated, it's not a RIDE control, it's a legislated control.
Which brings me to my point. If we're not the only school affected by this, it's statewide.
Right.
This is a topic that may want to be addressed at the legislative level.
So to be honest with you, this is on the list, again, the largest one, and you'll see that on, I believe it's next month's agenda, where the transportation resolution, Lincoln's already put their resolution together because Mario Carino's on their school committee and he is leading up the transportation committee. So we received their resolution today from Town Manager Karen Pinch, and then we'll look to mirror that to be able to show the state we're asking to a different way for them to fund transportation that will give us more money back into the funding.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay, a couple more on my list. We did go over, so 732 is a salary stipend.
If that's
For
contractual rate.
PD, yeah, and that was something we did talk about. But that's just one of those instances where you're paying for the PD, but then you're also giving stipends to educators to take the PD, but that's contractual, we can't change that. 5134, I don't know how I went backwards.
So that is the increase for maintenance, repairs, athletic equipment. So required by law, we have to recondition our football helmets, baseball helmets, softball helmets, lacrosse helmets, shoulder pads for football. And that's currently in the General Assembly. And that's our mosquito spraying, which has increased, if you all remember. We've had the Triple E increase, so we've got to stay on that as well. But the reconditioning doesn't happen every year.
That's really safety.
Correct.
You know, it doesn't say that
But
here, but that to me is, that's
Correct.
safety. It's
You-
not
you're
just
right, you have to
maintenance.
ensure your athletes.
Yeah, right, okay.
Correct.
5683 and to 85. I don't know
That's
if we
middle
talked
school
about
curriculum
these.
science kit.
Did we talk about, that's the science, the new, that's,
Yep, that's for next year. Yep, science
Okay.
replenishing the kits.
you said replenishing the kits, okay.
Yep. There's like a thing that comes with it.
And then my last one I have here, 6214, I don't know if we did that one.
It's the same thing. It's the tech hardware. So the leasing versus the line shows reduction in leasing, but it's increased for purchasing. It's still at
Okay.
621, yeah.
Yep. So, do you know what the other line is?
I'll ask my friends over here to look that up while we move on. The one where we reduced for the leasing. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for answering these questions.
No, I think it's helpful for people to hear because then you know what the money's allocated for and we all get the same information at the same time.
And I think it's good to recognize, you know, we're looking at this budget and like someone else said, they're not just numbers. And there's always a lot of context behind it, a lot of layers, and of course, always, you know.
No, I mean, this is an ongoing process for our team. We are always looking for efficiencies. We're always thinking about what's best for students, and how to be fiscally responsible. The budget you have in front of you is my proposal, right? It's based on what you asked me to do, a review of the district, a review of the finances, a review of the strategic plan, the needs of the district, and where we fall in that continuum. This is what I'm proposing. today is the day, this is, February 11th is when you'll approve that for your hands and determine, where you want to make those changes, and it becomes your budget. But this is what I believe the district needs to be able to do the work that we have put together on the strategic plan. And keep the lights on and the heat on and everything else function.
So before we go to questions from those who are joining us here in the audience and from the community, we should keep in mind that it has been discussed in the past that there have been multiple budget workshops. This is the only scheduled budget workshop that we have before the February 11th meeting. There are 2 of our committee members who are not here this evening due to illness. I don't know if there is an appetite for scheduling another budget workshop before our February 11th school committee meeting. We've had, up to 4 budget workshops in the past. And this is our only scheduled one. So I just wanted to put that out there. Laura?
I would certainly like to make a motion to put another budget workshop on, in the works, because I think that, that we're talking about a $69 million budget, and even in the amount of time that we are given to digest all of this information, many of us, we all have full-time jobs, so going through these budgetary numbers, I think it takes a little bit more time than just one session. So I would, if I can make that motion right now, I'd like to.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? Jess?
So this is something that I was hoping for as well. But now that I'm looking at the calendar, there's 1 week between now and the budget next meeting. I think I'd prefer to schedule it between February 11th and March 11th, but then we also have the annual public hearing. So maybe the week of February 25th is what I could see. But I think to have it next week seems like
Might be too hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
not
Thanks for
enough
that
time for
feedback.
folks to schedule and have it in their
Yeah,
calendar. So if we are going to do it, I would prefer the week of February 25th.
Karen?
So I agree with Jess. I think trying to schedule it between now and the 11th is too rushed, and it's not going to be fruitful. So I would actually propose tabling it until and having this discussion at the next scheduled school committee meeting to see if there's a appetite at that point for a scheduled meeting instead of trying to schedule it now. Because we might come to some resolutions on the 11th.
Well, it's a motion, so it's not on the agenda, so you don't table it. You still have to vote on the motion as presented, and you would just
We have a
vote
motion
no
and a
if you
second
want.
for a second budget workshop, not necessarily on a specific date. So,
Right. I didn't mean having it scheduled next week. I just meant before we end up.
I know, I know many of you, just so you know, this, when we have the budget workshops, if you go back, you're always missing members. So all I ask is that, unless it's in your sickness, that if we're going to schedule that you attend, we're always here, happy to help. But if we're not attending, then it becomes not productive. So I want to make sure, and I think this is productive, like today was very productive. But nothing was, it was question oriented. I just want to remind you that, like I said, the budget isn't something that, my concern is that the question so far is a level of understanding, but there are some questions where I'm not sure I understand how it would help with the budget. So I think we have to balance, how is this going to help us shift the budget for the strategic plan and our kids versus I'm learning the budget, which is different, and we can do that sometimes differently. Like Ms. Dinsmore asked for a meeting. We offer those meetings every time new members come in. So there's a different level of, I think, sometimes need. Because understanding school budget is different than your personal budget or business budget, because it's got its pieces. So I think if people want to learn the budget more, and what you did may be helpful, but specific to, like, here's where I'm thinking of cutting, this is where we sort of need an understanding of a dollar amount. If you're looking to, if they're not looking to, great. But if you are, so we need to be able to plan, and if we're waiting, and if people have ideas, we need to know them so that we can plan for that.
so we go ahead, Polly.
I was just saying, thinking maybe we should amend that motion to put it on the agenda for the 11th to discuss a date then.
Well, typically, because you do a Tuesday, because that's the meeting, that's what, it's typically the same day that you meet, or a Thursday. That's when budget workshops have been held in the past.
So are you saying that you would, there's from Karen and Jess, a meeting after February 11th. So the suggestion was February 25th. And so would the administration be open to the 25th?
6 o'clock?
Yeah, 6 to 8 is budget workshops.
So would you be willing to amend your motion to make another budget workshop to February 25th?
Yes.
Do I have a,
We have to withdraw the first one.
okay, so if you could rescind your first motion,
And then
Rescind the first motion,
rescind the second.
rescind the
Just a
second.
second.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
So motion withdrawn. Would you like to make another motion, Laura?
Yes. I'd like to put forth a motion to have another budget workshop scheduled for February 25th from 6 to 8.
Do I have a second? We have a second from Larry. Discussion. I think we've discussed it already. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the administration for being able to be available on February 25th. Thank you. Larry, and then we'll go to the audience.
Just for S and Gs, as I'll put it,
I don't know what that means.
shits and giggles. Could you, on that February 28th, come back to us?
25th?
25th, excuse me, what a level funded budget would look like?
So I would need to know what programs you're interested in, because this is what I suggested, but you would need to cut.
You don't have to tell us tonight, I'm just,
No, the dollar amount though, but I need to know where, like.
Larry, it's
I-
our job to cut in the
Right,
area.
so
She can tell you what we need to cut, but it's up to us to cut the.
So you've got to give me, people, programs, I need to know specifics. Level funding would require a $1,166,492 from the budget. If, I know in the past you have asked me about different towns, so Richmond is the highest this year, so if you want to cut and bring Richmond down to level funding, it's $583,447, is that correct, Chris?
583,400.
47. So the only, the thing that I know people have mentioned, and it's been in the school committee updates, is you have 3,000 students, you have to make decisions for 2,900. The Hope Valley conversation has come up to me via email through the updates, but that is about $1 million in savings without touching other programs and people. So the question is, are we focusing on 2,900 or 100, and how do you want me to manage that?
Pat?
Do we have a list? I know we had moved a lot of programs we paid with ESSER funds. Do we have a list of what those were that are in this budget now?
There's nothing left.
Okay,
That's been going for over a year.
right.
I think what she means is what was funded through ESSER, that is now not funded
Yep, it
through
was
ESSER.
curriculum, professional development, and the dean. Those were the three big buckets. And if you go back to previous budget years, it's listed in the FAQs and it's listed in the presentation.
So no positions.
No.
No, did that on purpose.
So basically, I need to know: do you want to? Are you looking to? Is it class size? Is it programs? Is it bus steeples? You have to give me some areas to review, and to know how much money you want us to go into. Because I've given you my proposal. Now you've got to let me know where you want me to look.
Laura and Craig.
So I think that what would be helpful is if we are looking at the enrollment, that would be very helpful. If we had a better understanding of the number of students as well as the resources that are being dedicated to those students at each of the schools, I feel like that would be a good place to start, because if we, just looking at the enrollment numbers that were
So the
provided.
enrollment is included in your packet.
Right. so looking at those numbers, though, it's showing a downward trend in those numbers. And I think that it's important that, you know, that we have the full picture of the resources that are going to each of those, and so that we can see the trend data that's associated with that. The number of teachers that are needed for, you know, X number of students. For example, at the elementary school, being able, and I understand that there's some teachers that float. However, I think that there needs to be, there just needs to, it would be helpful for the committee if we had some finite numbers for, okay, these first through fourth grade teachers, they are at Charlestown Elementary School. There's this number of students that are there. There's this number of teachers that are there. And then we would be able to look at the historical data that's associated with that and figure out kind of, it's
you
almost
have
like
that.
backing into it.
So if you go to section 8, that exists and it gives you back from 2021. You have every single position in every single school by school code and the number by grade. And then if you go to section 7, you have the enrollment of the entire district by, and when you see, so for example, it may be helpful if I explain. So for section 7, if you look at Ashaway, for example, if you see those 2 columns, there's 2 classrooms per grade. And then if you go to the section 8 and you look at Ashaway, based on the code, which is on the last page, each school is coded. So, for example, Charahoe High School is 1, Charahoe Middle School is 2, Charleston Elementary is 3, Richmond Elementary is 4. And you look at the school code, it tells you exactly the number of positions per school. That always exists.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to figure out, so I know that this is just as an example. There's language classes that are taken at the high school level.
World language?
Yes, and we have French, Spanish, Italian. I know that some of those classes are really small. Like, for example, my daughter's class, there's 6 kids in her class.
French?
Nope, she's in Italian. So, but I know that there's also a French class where that's the same situation, where there's, you know, a handful of students that are in there. So what I'm trying to say is it would be helpful if we had a little bit better understanding of those type of situations and where there may be, you know, maybe there's some overages, maybe there's some places where things could be combined. Maybe we don't necessarily need the same amount of resources that are dedicated to a specific, you know, program.
Sure, so you are asking me to look at the world language to see if we can cut. So just to be clear, that's not a problem. It just, typically the parents and the students are used to be able to select a language. We can reduce the number of languages and then maximize class size. Is that what you want me to do?
Yes. And I'm saying that across the board, like as far as, you know, looking at it from that perspective of the resources that are going to these specific places and what that actually looks like.
So what
Because it's hard to decipher all of that information within these budgets, especially when you're looking at the detailed pieces of it.
So Craig, then Karen.
The district is paid for demographic studies, so our latest study, a few years old, you could probably look at that. That's going to tell you your population shifts and what to expect within the next 10 years. We have one right here.
So we have the world, I'm sorry, but do you mind if I say one thing? The world language, this is the first year, it's a graduation requirement. So you're now required to take world language, but you were not before. So that's why there was no changes in world language, because this is the first class, the 2028 class, graduation class, where that exists, so our freshmen. So now that we have that this year done, we can walk back the number of languages if that's what the committee so chooses. But I can put that, typically what I do for you at the next meeting, I provide a list of what you've asked me to put together in a budget cut document so that you can determine if that's the will of the committee.
Karen.
I wasn't finished.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you weren't finished. My apologies.
Whatever you propose, okay, level funding, whatever, just look at the long-term impacts. Use some, you know, common sense. I mean, prime example is what you just interrupted me for, but you said. That was brought to our attention at the last meeting.
I can tell you when I cut French 5, I received backlash. So just like when we did the buses, everything has a ripple effect. So when parents come, I know everyone likes to, we all want to support the parents and support our kids, but when you make a decision, you have to own the decision.
All right, so can I just finish?
Of course.
So in the past, we've had parents come right up and complain to us all the time. You were one of them.
I was.
You complained. Now you folks got to deal with that. Now I'm done.
So it's more of a clarifying question, I think, especially where it's a requirement now that the students take 2 years of a language.
Consecutive year.
Well, so cutting a language to our freshman students means they would have to start all over again with a language.
So I agree with you, Karen. So what I would look to do is maximize the class sizes and not cut, but move back. So for example, students will have to give us their requests and they may not get it. So parents may come to you and say, well, I know his request came in later than this request, but he doesn't want to take French. He doesn't want to take Italian. He doesn't want to take Spanish. So that's what happens with the ripple effect. But what we will do is we in full transparency, I will look at the course requests for next year. How many freshmen coming in, seniors, sophomores, because we have to go French 1, French 2, French 3, French 4, and then who needs what, and based on that, determine which language makes the most sense. That's what you want me to do. Like, you want me to say, this is based on the course request, based on the data of the student request, this is the language that has the least amount of requests. That's how I would approach it.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any?
That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Linda, I didn't see you.
That's okay. Thank you, Louisa.
Sure?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone from the community that would like to come up to the microphone and give us some feedback or suggestions? Goldie, is this pertaining to the budget, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Why can't you put the language online, like my son had it at the Met, where he took German online for 2-3 years, and you didn't need the regular teacher would walk around and make sure he was doing his homework, but on that, he took it totally online, and he also taught himself Russian.
Yep, so students who have interests in other areas, we call that virtual high school. That's available for anyone that exists. However, these are languages that are typically instructed and they're the most requested.
Okay.
Thanks, Goldie. Anyone else? Okay, so with Larry's question about what does level funding look like, and you gave us a number. That was 1.1 million something.
Yes.
1.1 million, 66,000 and something.
492.
492. Thank you. So in evaluating that number, if we were to look at reductions, but not at a full level funding, so would you be willing to come back and give us an evaluation of perhaps half that number and what that would look like without, in your opinion, sacrificing what we would regard as academic excellence? So is that doable? Is that realistic?
The conversation of Hope Valley has to take place. I can't move forward unless I know, because again, we're saving and safeguarding 100 over 2,900.
We're nickel and diming too.
And so for something that's short-lived, so we've got to be really mindful of this is something that we've had on every agenda item, but the parents are going to ask that you have 2,900 other students that are invested in programs throughout the district, and you're asking parents to accept changes when you're phasing out an elementary school that doesn't meet compliance of ADA and has significant needs.
But what if we were looking at longer term, not for this budget year, for next budget year, the conversation and the possibility about putting fifth graders back into an elementary school? If we took Hope Valley offline, would that be an impossibility?
No, but you definitely would be looking, All of your facilities are not up to state standards based on the facility reports. So there's significant needs. If you invest in so we have $75,000 right now in Hope Valley capital improvements. Every time we invest those dollars into a school that's coming offline, if the school doesn't exist 20 years down the road, we have to pay dollar for dollar. We're not going to get reimbursed. So it's a realistic conversation, and it's something that the committee has had on the table since 2005.
Okay, and Linda and then Greg.
I guess my question to you, Gina, is if we went to, help me, 1 and 2, we had to go to move the 5th graders back to elementary, I'm not sure the state would approve us using Hope Valley.
You're not even close to a plan, so you're talking another 2 to 3 years out.
Right, but what I'm saying too, if we hold out Hope Valley as an option to put kids in there again, it had to go through a major overhaul, or this, I can't imagine the state would.
Right, you would be looking to, similar to what we just put for the bond,
thinking
you would be looking, but RIDE won't allow you to do, they wouldn't allow us to do the 3 schools.
Right.
The land at Hope Valley doesn't have the necessary requirements based on the current state law, as we all know. And then there has to be a conversation about the middle school, but again, that's a large conversation it's an incredible task, can be done, but not quickly.
Right.
And yeah, RIDE's gonna have a lot of questions about the utilization and the planning, but that's not something, right now, taking Hope Valley offline, it's not ADA compliant. We've gone through the list, and it's cost us over $3 million to run.
Thank you.
Greg?
So last year, Gina, was I on the building committee?
Yes.
So as, I always confused the two. So as a resident, I asked to be part of the building committee and was honored to be put on it. I did ask about putting 5th grade back into the elementary schools as a principal of a middle school. I had some issues and concerns, and both SLAM and Colliers, those were the 2 firms we were working with, said due to the amount of vacant space you would create at the middle school, it would be very unlikely that you would be reimbursed on any of the square footage that would be included in the plans to bring 5th grade back. Because the state said, this is what our advisors told us, the state would say, you don't need the space for 5th grade to go to elementary. You have plenty of space in the middle school for them. You can do whatever you want, but you have to pay for it. And I don't think we're in a position to not be reimbursed 61%.
So that was kind of the Newport conversation when they were doing the high school. They had planned for an 1,000 person high school, but only had 600 students. So RIDE explained to them, they can do it, but they're not going to be reimbursed for it. So they only reimburse you based on your current enrollment and based on the square footage in the school building authority rules.
Thank you. Jess and Larry.
My immediate concern with Hope Valley is preschool. We can't close that school completely because preschool exists there. There is nowhere.
Preschool would go to Charlestown.
Where? Like in.
Mr. Denny has
there,
already
or-
been on site to be able to allocate as Mrs. Parr. Again, it's not pretty because you also have 3 old schools
Right.
that are old. And Charlestown, Richmond has been falling apart for the last 5 years. Charlestown is now crumbling as we speak. We've got pipes bursting every day. Today, the Marine Tech just lost its boiler. So that's an email coming to you tomorrow. The fire doors had to be fixed yesterday at the high school. So even though the main campus is 2010, these maintenance and repairs in your it continues to happen. But your elementary schools are, you've got teachers here, if you can ask, that between no heat, our maintenance and staff are there every single day. And out of all the schools, Hope Valley has the most concerns. And Richmond and Charlestown are, now where that school is, and Ashway is not far behind.
How many classrooms does preschool need? Is it
4.
4?
Actually, well, I'm sorry, we already have 1 here, so 3, right?
And they have classrooms that have bathrooms in Charlestown?
Yes, because of the way the kindergarten was set up, correct.
Other questions before we adjourn? So does the administration?
Ms. Davis.
Oh, Ms. Davis.
I'm going to be in opposition to you on the fund balance. You never had to use it. And
That's not true.
well, once, maybe.
No, that's not true. So Sharon, just let me say that because that is something that has been said now at the omnibus, which wasn't true, and now again tonight. Oil spill is another great example. Capital projects, the Hope Valley example, I'm not sure why. The MLL funding, I'm on the FAQ tomorrow. You will see a list of where we've used that fund balance, and it happens every year. I've had to use the fund balance every year, Sharon.
All right, well, I still think you can drop it down to 2. I'm not going
With the current
crazy.
legislation, with the federal government pausing all federal dollars, that's $3.9 million of revenue for the district. So the fund balance that's an example of the special education students' accommodations that we are required to ensure that they have. School lunch is
I'm
another
making my
example.
recommendation. You don't have to accept it.
I'm just want to say that we
Okay.
have used the fund balance.
All right, but I
And
still think
I'm happy to call you about
can-
your list. I'm ready to
All
do
right.
that next.
Okay, but I think that you could live with a 2% instead of 2.25%. That's all I'm saying. That's 130,000, you said?
160,000.
160,000. It's on the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor Davis. Craig?
Yeah, for those who want to cut the fund balance, if you cut it this year, what are you going to go after next year to make up for that? So just, my opinion, leave it in. You know, you go down to 0, that's it, it's done. We won't have $1.1 million to fix Hope Valley's bricks again. So,
Well, now it's their roof
yeah.
and their septic.
So Larry, Jess, Laura.
That's what Hope Valley's brought up now. What would the budget?
It's been
look
brought
like?
up. I was emailed about.
What would the budget look like if we shut it off in 2026? This is 2020. When we're done the school year, Hope Valley does not exist anymore.
It's in $1 million savings.
It's $1 million.
In
savings.
1 year, or is that over 3 years?
So the numbers that Mrs. Enian pulled for me, let me just go back to it. I sent it to the school committee on the update.
I pulled just under $500,000 without personnel.
Right, so then we included the personnel. Hold on, so I'm going to pull it from the updates I sent to the school committee.
And Gina, would you be willing to go through those line items for us and
Typically
also
what
for
I
the
would do is
public?
I'd put them on the budget cut form and show you how much per item overall. But let me just pull it up for you.
I got a second part to the question too.
So Hope Valley busing, 85,000, and again, I can put this on a sheet for you for next time. Hope Valley busing, 85,000. Hope Valley maintenance and utilities, 195,000. The Hope Valley Capital, 95,000. Hope Valley, 2 Hope Valley Grade 1 teacher FTEs based on current enrollment would be 200,000. Hope Valley 1 Grade 2, because we would need the other one, that would be 100,000. The nurse at 100,000, we actually received a resignation from a nurse, so that would be no impact to the district's personnel because that person, we have a resignation for the end of the year. The custodian at 60,000 and 1 teacher assistant at 40,000.
So the nurse would be, I'm sorry? Can you say that again?
The nurse is 100,000, but we did receive a resignation, so that position would be unfilled at the end of the year and no one would be impacted. And we can't cut grade 3 or grade 4 because based on current enrollment, we need all our teachers. So we would cut 2 grade 1 teachers across the district and 1 grade 2, a custodian, a nurse, like I said, current resignation, and a TA. And just to go back over, capital currently is at 95,000. Hope Valley maintenance and utilities is 195,000, and Hope Valley busing is 85,000.
And what was the line item cost for the custodian and the TA?
The custodian, 60,000, and the TA, 40,000.
Do you have a total?
Working on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I do have it right here. Hold on, I keep getting it to me. Okay. I have 280, it's 280,000 for services, 1 second. And then for the staffing is 500,000. And then
I got
capital is 264,750.
875,000.
875,000.
All in, 875.
Now, the second part to the question is,
Yes.
if I've read the Charahoe Act right, if you give up that building back to the town, is that building has to be put back to the condition that you got it?
It is, it's better.
It's better.
Okay.
We've already done that walkthrough,
Okay,
yeah.
I just want to make sure that,
It's in much better condition than it was turned over to the
okay.
district.
I just want to make sure that out of that 875, we don't have to.
No, we don't have to do anything to
Okay.
it.
Okay.
So, Pat, Laura, and I wasn't sure if there was a hand here. Okay.
So these staff positions, would they be allocated to fill vacancies in other buildings?
Correct. If they have the appropriate certification.
For maintenance? Maintenance would fill
Correct.
the
Like currently, we have 5
vacancies?
vacancies. Cutting one involves no one. We have, I don't think we have a TA vacancy currently, but I do know we have a retirement coming up. So again, and that tends to shift out.
Laura?
So just to understand that correctly, if that some of the personnel that is listed there, it sounds like some of them would just be migrated because they would kind of follow the students.
Correct,
Is that
grade 3, grade 4, and 1 grade 2. But it depends, so what happens is they would have access per their contract to positions that are open and to be able to go to the schools where there's vacancies based on their, so we have it 3 ways to choose. We have performance, seniority, and their experience.
Okay, and so, but isn't that the budget on the other schools would go up the same amount, or is that not?
So,
It doesn't matter because you already have the whole budget. So what happens is the codes go different. So you'd lose the whole Valley code and it would be coded down to the school where that staff member is.
so we did a course analysis. So for example, if Hope Valley spends currently $16,000 in paper, don't quote me on that, but we divided that paper among the 3 schools they would be going to. We didn't take that as
But that's why I didn't give you a supply line, because the students exist for the curriculum.
the copies that would still be made, the students, all the stuff that would follow the students.
We didn't include.
We didn't include.
Okay, understood. And then just on another side point, at the omnibus meeting, all of the 3 different towns shared information with us about, potential developments that they had in the pipeline. Charlestown was one of them, as well as Richmond. I know that there's a housing development for Hopkinton, but that's much further down the road, apparently. I'm just wondering that what would, how the impact that may have if there isn't, because some of these developers already have preliminary plans in place. But for, certain reasons, there may be issues with the site packages or something to that effect. How does, if you closed Hope Valley Elementary School, and let's just say hypothetically that Charlestown, they greenlight the 60 units that they need to build, then what happens? You no longer have that school, so what would the district do in that type of scenario is my question.
We're already working on that because we're required as part of every 5 years we have to do, but again, we haven't had the approved one yet, but this is my 5th, stage 1 for elementary schools since I've been here. And that requires, when we get that submitted, a stage 2 has to have a demographic study and it has to have an enrollment study. It has to go a minimum of 10 years out so that you can plan thoughtfully around births, permits pulled, houses, units, things like that. So part of that report is based on your enrollment. So for example, if we tell RIDE that we want to enroll, 300 kids in each school, we want to do however, 2 schools, 3 schools, 1 school, whatever, then we have to make those determinations. What I've explained to you is that based on the current enrollment, like I heard from almost every single member, is that we're losing kids. So we're addressing that. But when Hope Valley comes to the table, people are worried about kids coming. So I'm very confused about, are we worried about kids coming? Are we worried about losing kids? Because our demographic study shows what we
No, you
have.
may answer.
So we're losing enrollment, but I just want to make sure that if we have these housing developments come forward in 3 towns in the future, that we have the facilities to accommodate new kids coming into the district. And if we take a school offline permanently, are we being short-sighted about that?
I actually think you're being more fiscally responsible because your facilities are not they're needed in dire review. The I will, dollars to donuts, the renovation plan that comes in from the architect is going to tell you every one of your schools is going to cost more to renovate than it will, just based on the HVAC alone, than it will be for new construction. My hope is that people will see that the new construction plan, even if we have to go through a longer route to do it, is in the best interest and the most fiscally responsible. I mean, those of us that were just at the houses today with the Charahoe Tech, you know, there's the energy cost is $0. The people that have been in the units cost $12. Our schools are killing us with just the lack of energy efficiencies because they're so old. We're literally bleeding dollars out windows because the heat doesn't work, then it's too cold. I can't even keep up with the number of maintenance requests in the last 2 weeks. And I'm not talking about just the old buildings, but even the main campus. So to be really fiscally responsible and be really thoughtful, my recommendation, as I know my team, along with the necessity for school construction, is that new buildings are definitely going to be cheaper and more efficient. However, the only way I think our community will understand that is if we put the money in, which we did for the stage 2, to be able to show a renovation versus new construction plan. And at that point, we can have the conversation about the middle school, and I'm happy to talk to the school building authority. But in the end, we're bleeding money because our schools are so old and inefficient.
Thank you for that explanation. Anyone, Jess, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to Sharon's comment about fund balance, but also start out with saying I'm opposed to level funding. And part of that reason is because if you look at on the one-page budget sheet, and correct me if I'm wrong, admin, but almost halfway down, it says members town reallocation of fund balance, leaving 2.25% in fund balance. And if you go along, it shows 2022, there was $2 million, and then we were level funded. And in the next year, the fund balance was $388,000, which is because we were level funded and we had to resort to using the fund balance. So that year showed how level funding was a fiscally irresponsible choice, and we had to spend down the fund balance and put that money back in. And also the importance of having the fund balance there.
And that wasn't, that wasn't based because we wanted to, that was based on the requirements necessary to be able to do just the mandates.
Right.
It wasn't because, we
Like,
didn't want to
let's
get rid
just
of
spend
some.
let's just spend the fund balance. It wasn't like this
Right,
willy-nilly thing.
correct.
Right, okay. So I just wanted to point that out, because we like twinned. When it was said that we didn't pay the fund balance, we said, that's not true. We have used the fund balance. So just those 2 points, I am not in favor of level funding, and we do use the fund balance, especially in dire situations.
So we've had a robust discussion tonight, but we did not open it up to the community after we talked about what the potential cost savings could be if Hope Valley Elementary School came offline. So is there anyone from the community that would like to talk about that or express their thoughts about what the administration shared with us relative to a potential cost savings if Hope Valley Elementary School is taken offline for fiscal year 26? Okay.
May I just say one thing?
Yes, of course.
So anytime you take a school offline, it's an impact to a community. Hope Valley has a long history, and the spirit and soul of the school is impacted. Every time we have these conversations, the longer it takes, the more stress and strain on families, the more stress and strain on the students, the faculty, everyone, because it's not easy. And trust me, I don't enjoy that part of the conversation. It's a difficult decision. It's never easy. But again, I have 3,000 students that I'm charged with ensuring their educational programming, so I have to balance those needs. And digging into the budget and sacrificing 2,900, it's hard when I know that those 100 students are going to go to well-loved communities with excellent teachers at high-performing schools, Ashaway 5-star, Richmond 4-star, and Charleston 4-star. So I feel proud that they'll go and while it's a loss, those teachers and staff will follow them into the schools and hopefully will bring that spirit and culture to enhance those schools.
Thank you. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Have a great night.
You never use. I'm gonna, we do